Hey, welcome to Ask Mom and Dad. We are here again after a conversation Tanya and I started last time on, what we're talking about? Socialization. Not socialism, but socialization. We've checked to make sure all of our chemicals in our brains are keyed up, our oxytocin and not our never mind. That was last week's joke. It's old. Anyway, we want to pick up on where we left off there. We talked about a lot of things last time. Real quickly, just the question of socialization and whether or not that is real in the definition of that. What we're trying to do with socialization is help our children become functional adults. I think that's where I was going with that.
Well, yeah, let's re-quote that again, because
Sure.
I think
Right
it's valuable to consider what the quote definition. This is a definition from some guy named Durkin. Who is he?
Yeah.
From
I don't know. Durkin's a cool name.
1995. The socialization can be more accurately defined as, this is how he defines it, the process whereby people acquire the rules of behavior and systems of beliefs and attitudes that equip a person to function effectively as a member of a particular society. So we would say as adults, or as, right, where our goals are is that they're going to grow up to be able to function as adults. And like you had pointed out, one thing is that they are able to confidently know a little bit of who they are, which they'll be discovering all their lives, but a little bit of what they can participate, how they participate in society, how they interact with others. In this, if they don't, here's what I really want to address. If they don't know their own belief, this said rules of behavior and systems of beliefs and attitudes that equip a person to function effectively as a member of society, not that has to adopt what that society or that culture believes or thinks.
And really want to jump on that. I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I was just going to say, so if that child, or we're talking about children, and then we're growing them up, understands what they believe, what their beliefs are, what that construct is that they're going to rule their life by, allow everything to fall on. And we've talked about this in previous podcasts, and how the foundation, to me, is the most important thing, because it doesn't matter what they encounter. It doesn't matter who they encounter. If they don't know that first, nothing's going to gauge what their behavior is going to be later on. I mean, you can set up a system of rules, but why? Why be nice? Why not kill somebody? Why? I mean, it can be
how do we know murder is a bad idea?
Exactly. Right. What all the extremes of either sides of those. Well, so I believed when we were homeschooling, and I wanted to homeschool way back before we even had children. I think because I believed
you've been teaching me all these years.
Yeah, exactly. I believed that there was something that was innately responsible about that God had given. If God gives me a child, then it's mine before him to be responsible for what that child understands and knows, particularly to me, about him. Mm-hmm. And then how to interact with others is based on that to me, because that's my belief system. So my belief system is based on, obviously, I would start with the 10 Commandments and God's word and his love for my child and for me, that permeates everything we do. So when we chose to homeschool, I made our theme verses. There was a couple different places in the Bible, but specifically Proverbs chapter 2, the beginning first 6 verses. And to me, it kind of answers everything. It answers academics, it answers behavior and social norms. It also answers a system of belief and attitudes that they can interact with society, and they'll be accepted is not the right word. They'll be able to interact and functional at the same time as they'll be able to stand up against what they don't believe, or what is wrong.
And your answer.
So I thought I might read that.
Yeah, please read the Bible.
Should I?
Yeah, sorry.
Just those couple verses.
And I'll come back to it and tie it in with something you said last week real quick. But go for it.
My son, if you receive my words
Where are you reading first?
I'm reading from Proverbs 2, 1 through 6.
You said that. I'm sorry.
And this is, of course, going to refer back to the Word of God. So, my son, this is God, or this is
Lady
God's
Wisdom.
the Spirit of wisdom. If you receive my words and treasure up my commandments within you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as a hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright, and he's a shield to those who walks in integrity. It's just so much. The rest of that chapter is even guards the path of justice, watching over the way of his people. It's so important to me that they understand that all knowledge, anything that's worth learning, comes from God. All knowledge, all wisdom. God is the ultimate source of that. So why would I trust someone out in the culture to teach my child
with no foundation?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and even so, to have decided without my interaction what is best.
Right.
I don't have a problem with, maybe there's a group of people who get together and decide this is right to teach children. But I haven't been in on those classrooms or in on those curriculum meetings, or I haven't looked at every in and out of how, and I don't expect that teacher to be accountable to me. That's they've chosen a field that I think is worthwhile because a lot of parents can't choose. They've chosen to work, or they've chosen different settings that academically they can pass on their education to someone else. But the bottom line is, if I don't set that precedent at my home, whether or not academically I teach every ounce of what they learn is irrelevant to me, because where I've started with is all wisdom and all knowledge comes from God. So then anything else that can be added to that.
Anything else that can be added to that. You left off on that last week before we ran out of time. And you were saying that something along the lines of, you believe that if you surrounded them with good books, that as far as teaching them, the complications, because there's the three categories in this question that was, or this definition was influence, activity, and exposure. Are they being exposed to the things that they need to be exposed to so they can function in the world? One of the critics would say that, they go out into the world, and when they do, it's all foreign to them because they've been sheltered by their parents who want them to only worship, they won't have a clue. They'll be just, it'll be culture shock all the time. Well, I think we can prepare them for culture and just say,
from our vantage point, though.
We have a biblical foundation that says we're aliens in this world anyway. So we start out kind of understanding that we
sci-fi.
Yeah, not that kind, but it would be an interesting series. So anyway, we're talking about influence mostly right now. And so you're saying the first foundation is coming. The first influence on us comes from the Bible. You send a kid off to a public education system, especially one that doesn't value that same foundation. As a parent, you have to be actually more involved in the school to be checking those values. Whereas if you're homeschooling, you can prepare them for a worldview that doesn't value what you do. Yeah. That was my experience with our kids. Just for full disclosure, we didn't homeschool our kids all the way through. We won child, and he is the weirdest of our children. And
okay, I hope he doesn't hear this.
No, he would say he is the weirdest of our children. Yeah, this is the guy who made a hat out of duct tape and wore it proudly in Walmart.
That's a good point.
And so, never mind everything that we're going to say from this point forward. We've just demonstrated to you that homeschooling kids are weird. But that's. But
he's kind of proud of that, and really has become a very functioning adult. So I'm pretty sure he would say something good about it, though.
He's the man, and
he's made it through. How many re-ups in the Navy though now, and still they haven't kicked him out for being weird.
He's managed to deal with a whole bunch of other interesting people, but he's the only one that went all the way through.
Yeah.
And by his own choice. We gave our kids a choice, and I said that when we first started homeschooling. I want to make sure that we handle the influence in the years when they're most formative.
That's exactly what I want to say real fast, because we talked in the last podcast about starting out very early, understanding that literally the day they're born, they're under your influence, and everything you do is going to be shaping who they are, and it's going to be, you start teaching them at that moment. You start socializing them at that moment. So yes, then when you get up to academics, then you can kind of let them help you make some decisions about where they want to go.
Right, right.
So when Josiah, our oldest, got that to high school, he didn't really care about going to public school. He wasn't really interested, but I'll tell you that he was really extracurricular wise. He was involved with a couple of schools, and he volunteered. He was a dancer. He was involved in ballet.
Yeah,
so
he did all kinds of things that he wouldn't have been encouraged to do necessarily in high school.
Yeah, he played instruments. He did all kinds of. So it wasn't as if he just, sheltered at home, but he was a reader. He loved to read.
And that goes to exposure. Just on a side note, I want to be real quick because we kind of do have both sets of homeschool kids in this world.
Yeah,
we had the one who just geeked out at home, but was he not exposed to everything he needed to be exposed to? No, there was a way to expose, and there still is, especially now. Schools are much more cooperative with homeschool families than they ever have been. He was in orchestra. Did he do orchestra? Yeah, he did. He played bass in the orchestra. He was involved in
more of a youth community orchestra, though. That wasn't at a school.
Yeah, it was still, but that's the thing. There are community orchestras. There's places, and they aren't just full of homeschoolers. Most of the time, orchestras are full of very smart people from various ethnicities.
There's rec department interactions in sports too, as well as academics at high schools and such. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah, it's not just saying that homeschool children just go to church or their special club of whatever, and that's the only place they ever get socialized. No, we expose our kids to many different varieties of activities. And I do think it's important to recognize that you're right. Our son's in the Navy, which means he's been around the world a little bit. And I think I've never heard him come back to me ever saying that it was weird or odd to be in other places. He just engaged the world with a sense of wonder to say, this is amazing.
Oh my goodness,
people who come back are different. They think.
He got the chance to live in Italy and to literally, when he was, I want to say he was probably upper elementary, like 6th grade or so. He was fascinated with the Pompeii, the book. We had a little couple interactive books that were on the Pompeii volcano, covered the whatever. So when he lived in Italy, he literally lived within an hour of Pompeii.
And he went a couple times.
Got to be, oh my goodness, I got to visit him myself. And the other one, Herculaneum there, that were both Mount Vesuvius explosion. Yeah. So
future
to me,
of Washington State.
That's kind of coming full circle and living the full homeschool life, because he got to live a little bit of that at home without feeling because the thing I notice about kids who kind of grow up more public school oriented, whatever, they're not really allowed to do what might be really interesting to them. They may or may not, if they have a really great teacher, they may be able to kind of
that's so important.
Living, in a
one of the biblical
classroom. But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you just said something so vital. That one of the biblical tenets, I have a pen, I can point at you. One of the biblical tenets is that we should train up a child according to the way he should go. People oftentimes mess with that and make it sound like the most, punishment or whatever. But that's not what that verse is saying. It's saying, see where the child is wired and bend him, take him towards that bent. In other words, the parent is more able to see what a child is gifted or desirous towards, and you can do that. And you were saying just now that you can the school system in a rigorous curriculum, we must have the balanced thing. I mean, we could spend a period of time not dealing with one subject matter at all because the child is really latching into this historical subject matter. And so we can give all the time to that, and then we can start bringing in these other things later on as they're needed. Mm-hmm. You took a great books approach early on with them and said, we're going to read as broadly and experience nature and those kinds of things.
Yeah, kind of. It was based on an educator named Charlotte Mason, who believed that children should not ever be dumbed down for them, that they should be given the highest of knowledge, the best of
that sounds the opposite of the school system that we have.
Yeah, right. The best of art supplies, the best of all worlds. And then it kind of laid it at their feet. They will do whatever they're supposed to do with it. Whatever their brains connect to, they'll connect to.
It's funny.
It was kind of exciting because I read Dickens to them and everything, and they were glassy-eyed as all get out.
And you guys will watch
But we still talk about it, and they love those moments, even if they didn't absorb every bit of all the flowery language of a Charles Dickens novel. They appreciated, first of all, time, the time I spent reading to them. So to me, that's the very first piece. I'm showing them I care about them, number one, because I'm not doing something else. I'm right there with them, teaching, and reading to them. So kids appreciate just that the parent has paid attention to them. Then the second part of that is that you are their challenger. You really are their one that's going to introduce what is values and what is, so you can talk about, you were saying to introducing them into, like, exposing them to cultural things or whatever. Well, the bottom line is you want to, quote, expose them from your own angle, your own understanding, and teach them how you see the world, because they're going to be quote exposed, at the friend's basement when they're watching this movie or at the such and such. But if you aren't there with them, helping them through that,
there's movies they've seen that I didn't know they've seen.
It's going to be fear driven. It's going to be intimidating to them. And if they're meant to in those social constructs to just buck up and take it, then their friends or their peers, whoever it is, are going to tell them how to behave to it, how to react to it, how to whatever. So it's really important to me that we as parents take on that responsibility, that we are their value teachers. We are their actual literal first teachers. Anyone else that's speaking into their lives should be secondary, should be, and it's going to be true no matter if you take that on as a responsibility or not.
Yeah.
They're going to look at your life as the adult in their life, the guardian,
the initial adult, the
first. And they're going to value what you value. They're going to believe what you believe, whether or not in truth,
they're going
to
chase what you chased.
Yeah.
I think, and I think in the exposure thing too, one of the things that came to my mind when you were talking about it was, exposing them to culture. Well, we got to choose what culture we expose them to. You expose them to, 18th century English literature. You expose them to, that's culture. You expose them to Greek and Roman culture. And the education aspect of it is broad. It's interesting to me today that there's a lot of kids coming out of the public school system that don't even know American culture. That's
what I was going to say. Don't even know American history, let alone history of other.
They couldn't tell countries. You what, and I'll grant you, I can't quote the amendments of the Constitution one by one. We know the ones that are constantly.
But if you're like me, you could say most of the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, because we were challenged to say that.
Memorize
right?
that sucker, yeah. And so it's funny to me because people. So what the question is, if people can't tell you what basic American history is, because there's currently a war in our culture as to what basic American history is. There shouldn't be, but there is, because there are people that want to dismantle it and reshape the way our countries. They want to reshape our country based upon our mistakes rather than our ideals. And I think that's a huge mistake to try and if you focus on the failings of people, you create a failing people. Tweet that. That's really good.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And if you
and it's true. If you
not that we tweet, but
that's true though, because that's true about people as well. If you focus on their failures, their weaknesses, they're gonna feel weak. But if you focus on their strengths, you highlight who they are, you're gonna pull them up to another level. So that's the same with cultures and same with just education in general. But yeah, so we read this book called This Country of Ours, and it was just a first person narrative of the United States history. And I'm trying to think now if we even made it all the way through it, but the kids really enjoyed that. We also read something called, which is one of Josiah's favorites still to this day, I think, Our Island Story. And it's actually going all the way back to England and where we came from, and how most of this continent comes from that part of Europe. Most of Americans would trace their roots back to Eastern Europe or Western Europe. Anyway, so things like that connect to children, though, those are academic slants, but I would still say all the way back to talking about the socialization thing. The point of teaching children to interact is that they first must interact with their parents and then with their own siblings. And I would just I would say, as much as there are single children who are born into and don't have siblings or whatever, put them with other children of like heart, of like parents that you would like that are going to raise your children similar to the way you want to. So that's why we would encourage church, because we know that at least the people that are going there are attempting to understand and trust in God, and to bring their children up to know that. Now, there are some
and let me
even in
point
churches.
back to what I just said. If you focus on the negative, people see church as a negative. And for the life of me,
that's true.
I can't understand why. I mean, I can understand why. Because church tells you something that you don't want to hear. You know you're broken and you need other people. Most people, which is odd to me, because most people, if you push them in a corner, they'll tell you they're broken, but they don't want to live that vulnerably in public. They don't feel safe to do so. Another product of our culture. Thank you very much.
That's true.
But church is the message of church. And I've said this throughout my ministry, and I'll continue to say this. God has a best for you. He didn't make you to function dysfunctionally. And nobody in this world buys a car and says, now I hope it doesn't run right. You know, God doesn't intend for that for his people. Instead, he takes broken cars and he makes them run optimally, not just right, optimally. So I think it's important to understand that when you go to church, the focus in a church, and I'm going to just give this to you as a guide for church functioning. If your church doesn't leave you both aware that you need to grow and mature, that there's brokenness in you, but yet with a sense of hope that you can be shaped into something better. If you don't have that balance, you're in the wrong church. If you're constantly condemned, you're in the wrong church. If you always feel good and don't think anything's wrong with you, you're in the wrong church. There's a weighing, a balancing of understanding in a broken world how a perfect God desires to make us function in the way that we're designed.
Well, and again, to trust that God gave us a guidebook, that everything about his word is trustworthy. And when I was reading that from Proverbs, that first few verses, if you take what that's saying, is that this whole entire word that he's given us, that he's sanctioned throughout literal millennia of history, that he has preserved since way BC.
I like that.
More than any other book. Well, it's more related than any other, more trustworthy than any other book that exists. Then bottom line is probably worth a look and probably worth teaching your children from.
Right.
So I want to add back in this, the beginning of this chapter again from Proverbs 2 says, my son, if you receive my words. So I would also encourage you and treasure my commandments within you to find a church that believes the Bible and that sticks to the Bible and does not compromise it, because it's so valuable. So valuable. You're not going to understand everything in it, and you're not going to be able to live everything in it. That's not the point. The point is it's God's message to you. It's his heart to you. It's his constant words into your heart and life. And if you're giving that to your children, then you're always going to be giving them wisdom and instruction and trustable commandments, trustworthy hope, like you were saying. On down further past that verse that I read, it says this person that, let me back up to verse 6. For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He's a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints or his people. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity. Hello? All the themes that are going on in our culture right now?
Does it really say equity?
Then you will understand righteousness, justice, and equity in every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you. What every parent wants is to take care of that child and protect them. Discretion will watch over you. Understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness to walk in the way of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil, and men whose paths are crooked, or who are devious in their ways. So you will be delivered from, and then it talks about being delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress, from the companion that's not trustworthy, one that forgets to be in covenant with God. So much of the scriptures are meant to guide our children. That's the whole entire point. If they will seek and trust that the wisdom from their parents is also going to be, pointing them toward God.
So the encouragement there, parent, is if you don't have a solid understanding of we kind of started there. Our foundational influence for us as parents is the Bible. We believe that the Bible is the best rule of life, and we believe that because we believe that God is the giver of life. Now, if you don't have that foundational belief, you're going to work from a different place. But I don't want to say that you can't raise children, but you're not going to raise them in the way we would.
Challenging,
and
maybe.
Yeah. And I just.
Well, and I want to add one more verse in Isaiah that gave quite a few homeschoolers around me a lot of comfort. Is that the bottom line? No matter what you do, no matter what you speak into your children, God is really their teacher. And ultimately what you want to do is point them to him, because anything, like we read in Proverbs, anything that is true wisdom or true knowledge is going to come from him, and he's their best source. But also he's their best lover, their best protector, their best guardian of all their lives. But in Isaiah chapter 54, verses 13 and 14, it says, all your children shall be taught by the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. In righteousness you will be established. You shall be far from oppression, for you will not fear, and from terror, for it will not come near you. This whole chapter is just on eternal covenant and peace, and how God has made himself available to everyone. How he's literally put out his hand and said, take my hand, I'm going to walk with you, and you can trust me. And that is the reassurance that our children are also going to be taught by him. If we are trusting him, then that will be the natural outflow, is our children will learn to trust him.
And I guess I can build on that too, because it says in verse 15, if anyone attacks you, it's not from me. Whoever attacks you will fall before you. And that's saying that God is our ultimate father. And again, we talked last time about single parenting. And I think if you find yourself, as a mother or father in this, I think the beautiful thing is we need to understand that God created the soft side of love and the hard side of love. So God is the balance, and he is the one that gives us the proper ability to function within the right tensions in life. And I think it's important to understand that what I just said about church. Church doesn't attack people; it builds up people.
That's right.
And I was reading. I could go into my quiet times and tell you some of the things I was reading. I was reading the Apostle Paul as he was trying to make the argument that his ministry was valuable. And in that argument, he was saying, this is who I am, this is who, and what had happened is people had come into the church and began comparising. I made a new word, comparising. Yeah. They were comparing Paul to themselves, and Paul's not as good a speaker as I am, or as good a speaker as this person is. And Paul actually doesn't come in to say he's a better speaker. He actually argues that he's on solid footing with the rest of them. And his argument is, I am as able to speak into this situation as anyone here. He does make the point even more, but then he says, because of his background and his training and those kinds of things, but then he says, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I have a voice in this. And he's making the argument that what I walked away from that was as a follower of Jesus, we speak not to tear down anyone, even people who might be tearing us down. We speak to say we have a voice and our voice matters, and to build up, not tear down. That's why he used the word tear down in this. So his argument was to say, I'm here to build you, not to tear you down. I have the courage to say what needs to be said. And so as a parent, we need to be busy about saying, how do we build up our children? And that does include correction and discipline. Those are things you can't just ignore. You don't just let your child fall into whatever shape he wants to. If you don't put walls around water, you're just going to have a puddle. You need to put it in a glass so you can drink it. It's useless on the floor. And so anyway, I just, that influence, that foundation, exposure to the right things is our responsibility as parents. And if you send your kid to school, you don't forfeit that responsibility. You're a fool to do so. You have to understand you've just invited, you have to work harder.
Yeah. You just have to work
and so that brings me to the last two things that I want to deal with. And the last one's activity. We did let our other kids, I think all of them, actually go to some form of public/hybrid school along the way. Our three girls all were just desperate to go to high school. They wanted to participate in the high school thing because they unfortunately made friends. And Fortunately, they made friends.
And unfortunately went to prom and all that.
They went to all those things.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah. But I want to say one more thing. It's just now it's going to seem random in the context of things, but you made a comment earlier about on the Charlotte Mason method. It said to give them the best of exposure, and that included everything else. I was going to say the one thing I remember from that was funny to me was having to buy the most expensive colored pencils. I don't know if you remember that. We went and what I want to say to that,
the most expensive. It was particular.
They were just pricey.
Yeah,
and then we had to order
brands.
them at like Bic, and we had to go and get them. And I'm like, they're kids. Why are we buying them? I remember thinking that, and you and you were reading these nice books that we still have, and telling me this is why we want them to experience art. If they're going to love it, they can't have an obstacle. They need to enjoy it, and so get the best so they can enjoy it. I want to say this, dads, I worried too much about money. I didn't have any, so I was worried about it for good reasons. But we still found a way to get those things. And as a result, our kids, one of our daughters likes to draw. She's huge into art as a result of it. Yeah. And paint and those kinds of things. So don't let your fear of what you don't have inhibit the opportunity to give something to your child that will enrich them a long way. So that's something I thought of a while ago. I actually remembered to say it again. But
one of the angles that we did, which I think, comes back to our whole, which one? Endorphin, dopamine? I'm not sure which one it was.
our list.
Well,
what was it? You're looking for
compliments?
Compliments?
We ever did was called a science journal, but it was just everything that we did for science. We drew into a really great drawing. It would be like a sketch pad, so it had really good paper. That was another angle on the good art supplies.
Paper. We were buying art paper,
but they were legit notebooks, so that they were all contained. We would go to these small little zoos that were like community zoos, and we would stand and draw the animals. And they were, again, another thing they were supposed to do is be, put the coloring books away and legitimate just look at something and draw it. Because children, at one age or another, and I can't remember actually the age it is, but there's an age where their mind starts to just do like adults do and fill in gaps rather than actually looking at something and seeing lines and being able to draw what they see. So there's a age where they do that, and it's kind of interesting because you can see it happen. You can see a child all of a sudden now draws a stick figure, whereas a couple years ago or 6 months ago they might have drawn like an arc and then maybe tried to draw an eye, or in other words, it's a switch. Well, if you can catch those switches and not let them happen, or if you can teach a child past those are all things that as a homeschooler are fun to learn. Even my own self, I loved learning that about teaching or about learning.
Yours as a homeschool teacher, you were as much a student as you were a teacher.
Yeah. So and that gives what I want to kind of add in that is that gives the parent a lot of I don't know, purpose maybe, but also it makes life rich when you can give that to your child. And I know some parents, and one other angle I will say, I know a lot of parents feel the pressure of money and of supplying what is needed. But I want to ask you if it's possible for you to sacrifice in that area and a little bit maybe of your own pleasure to give to your child that time you've got, rather than to go and work and make lots of money and have a great, huge house or do whatever, but to give that little bit. And for a while we ate beans and rice, I think, for a little. I don't know. There was times that I
didn't like beans or
God
rice.
always provided for us, but we sacrificed a little bit. We cut some corners, tried to save some things so that I didn't have to go to work. But I also say that we had enough children that if I would have and had to have put any of them in daycare, it wouldn't have balanced out. It would have been.
No, I don't think so. Well, again, every time when they're young, every time you expand their exposure, you're still responsible for them. Yeah. So, when you take a homeschooling environment, you actually have control over that exposure. You're saying where they go, and you can do things that reinforce things. And you actually that's your job as a parent, is to shape them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm saying even financially, I don't think it necessarily outweighs itself for a parent if they can give up a little bit of that dream of career or whatever to stay home for a little bit and try to do that. I really think the rewards are much bigger than you think they're gonna be, and the sacrifice is not as difficult. Yeah. But it is truly a choice to make, and that piece of it. The other parts of it, no matter whether you've put a child in regular, public school setting or any other school setting, the biggest takeaway I want anyone to get from this is that they are their children's teacher. So they're their social guide.
Their socialization.
So no matter who they're with or what they're doing, they are their social instructors or help or guide or whatever. So take them to church, take them to the cross, take them to the Bible, and then put them in places where they can get to know some really good people with some good character, and make friends that are going to be valuable to them later. That. Well,
the other piece in this was activity, and I read activity as, do they get enough exercise? Well, our kids have never been, they developed pretty normal. They were round and pudgy when they were little, then they hit their teens and they got pudgier. And then the boys particularly just got physically fit and they got 17 feet tall, or at least I'm the shortest of the men in my family. No, Josiah's shorter than me. Wait, is Josiah shorter than me? Yeah, I think he is. All my other boys are big, tall. I'm big. They're tall. Anyway, so activity, you can expose, you can take your kids and find things for them to do. We didn't have to constrain. When we wanted to go for a hike, we just went for a hike. We didn't have to wait. Oh, they got school today. They got this.
Exactly.
We spent a lot of time in the desert trying to figure out how to do Charlotte Mason stuff in the desert.
Exactly. But like I said, you can take them to places like museums and zoos and such, and that is their school. So they draw the animals, but they also learn about this particular animal and what its habitat is, or they learn this or that angle. If you're at a museum, they can apply some of the things they're learning, some of the things you have to counter because not all the information's true. And so you go home and you talk about what was good and what was not. There's so many different ways. I mean, literally, even just when we were in the desert, it was difficult because the foliage was kind of all the same. There was only so many cactus and sagebush and a few creosote bushes. But anyway, but when you are able to go out and experience different types of environments like that, kids are learning all the time, and they're watching you and they're learning from you no matter what you're doing, even if it's just that they've come home from school and they find out what's important to you. Or when you've gotten up in the morning and sent them off, you sent them to public school, whatever. What did you do first before? Did you read your Bible before you sent them out? Did you talk to them for a few minutes and let them know that you love them and that, that you're praying for them that day or whatever? Those types of things matter even if you're not going to actually just teach them at home.
I'm listening to this and I'm thinking that really homeschooling is, the definition of socialization is everything that school is. I know that people are saying, well, are they getting enough activity? Well, if socialization is teaching them to be an adult that functions in society, then you're teaching them where their influences should come from and what they can trust.
Yeah.
You're teaching
and
them
hopefully you're
how they should.
You're watching the movies with them and you're saying, well, is this smart or is that good or is this value
and
good?
Our children got to watch us debate what was good and not good, especially when it came to media. And I would always say, I'm not going to say this as a confession because it's not really. If I wanted to watch something, I'd say I would teach them the critical analysis skills that they need in order to understand how to define this movie. And sometimes that might have been selfish, but that's another thing. Real quickly, I want to point out, you're going to be selfish because you're a human being.
Yeah.
Again, you need to know yourself. And that's what places like churches, they call you out and say, you know what, you're broken. That was a stupid decision you made. But also to say to you, but let's sometimes stupid needs to be called stupid.
Somebody that loves you can say, maybe what were you thinking there?
Well, a wise person would say, now, could you have made a different decision? But anyway, we're going to wrap this up. I just think that it's interesting to say we started this conversation, what about socialization? And we walked down a lot of journey as far as where, what the question is, are my children going to lack if they are schooled at home? That's, I think, what parents are afraid of.
Yeah,
and I think that's also saying something that when you say that, you're saying something about yourself. You're saying, I don't feel that I have everything that my child needs. I really want to tell you this. You have everything that your child needs if you are seeking out the things that you need.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important that if you're asking yourself, I'm deficient, well, then go find out where you're deficient and you grow. And the most wonderful thing about children is when they're small, they're pretty stupid. And that's an okay word. They're not smart.
Fools, right?
They're dumb. And so they're just about as smart as you are. So a lot of times if you have to start reading at a first grade level, that's fine. Learn with your child and grow with your child. And your child will love the journey more than you will. And they'll thank you for it when they're adults, as they have us. The Bible says literally they will rise up and call you blessed, which is what your kids say about you all the time. They think you're the perfect woman.
No. No.
I think you're the perfect woman. Let's see which one of those is.
Well, good, you're supposed
That's
to
your
know,
oxycodone.
Oh, okay.
Oxytocin. Your dozen. Anyway, thanks so much, Tanya, for sitting down with me for the last how many days we've been talking now. And well, we've been talking for a lot of days, 33 years.
Okay.
Well, there's some days we didn't talk in there. I'd have to go through and anyway.
Bye. I love you.
I love you too. Thanks for sitting here, listening to us, and I hope you guys will join us again the next time we ask Mom and Dad. The next time we respond to questions we've been asked or not asked. Anyway, thanks a lot. You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time.
I keep on